He bought a crumbling Victorian mansion for $800, thinking he'd found shelter for his daughters. But when he finally opened the sealed attic vault, what he discovered wasn't just wealth. It was a secret that powerful men had spent decades trying to erase, and now they knew he had found it. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The rain hammered against the windshield of Marcus's 15-year-old pickup truck as he sat in the parking lot of Riverside Elementary, waiting for the final bell. His phone screen glowed with 3 missed calls from the landlord, 2 past due notices from the electric company, and 1 text from his boss that he'd been dreading all day. "Need to talk. Come by after your shift." He knew what that meant. 6 months as a handyman for Dalton Property Management, and he was about to lose that too. Not because he wasn't good at the work, he could fix anything with his hands, always could, but because he'd missed too many mornings, called in sick too many times when Lily's asthma flared up, or when Emma's anxiety got so bad she couldn't go to school. The twins, 8 years old, his entire world. Marcus pressed his forehead against the steering wheel and closed his eyes. 3 years since Sarah died. 3 years of pretending he had it together, of smiling through parent-teacher conferences while his stomach churned with worry, of stretching every dollar until it screamed. He'd sold Sarah's car, her jewelry, everything that wasn't nailed down. The small life insurance policy had evaporated faster than morning dew, swallowed by medical bills and funeral costs and the everyday relentless need to keep 2 little girls fed, clothed, and believing their dad could handle anything. The school bell rang, cutting through his spiral of worry. He straightened up, wiped his eyes, and forced his face into the expression his daughters needed to see. "Dad's got this. Everything's fine." Lily burst through the doors first, her backpack bouncing, rain-soaked hair plastered to her forehead. Emma followed more slowly, gripping her folder against her chest like a shield. They were identical in appearance but opposite in everything else. Lily charged at life. Emma observed it from a careful distance. "Daddy!" Lily yanked open the back door and scrambled in, water dripping everywhere. "Miss Peterson said we can bring something for show and tell on Friday. Can we bring the birdhouse you made?" Marcus smiled, despite everything. "Course you can, Bug." Emma climbed in more carefully, buckling herself without being asked. She caught his eyes in the rearview mirror, and for a second he saw too much awareness there. She knew. Somehow, she always knew when things weren't okay. The drive back to their apartment took them through downtown Millbrook, a town that had seen better decades. Half the storefronts were empty, their windows papered over with faded for lease signs. The old textile mill that once employed most of the town sat gutted and abandoned on the hill, its broken windows like hollow eyes watching the slow death below. They passed Thompson's Diner, where Marcus sometimes picked up weekend shifts washing dishes for cash under the table. Past the library where Emma spent hours every Saturday. Past the church with the soup kitchen where pride had finally broken and he'd started taking the girls for free meals twice a week. "Dad," Lily piped up from the back, "why are we driving so slow?" "Because the truck's transmission was dying, and he was nursing it along until he could figure out what came next. Just being careful in the rain, sweetheart." Their apartment was in a complex that had given up trying to look respectable sometime around 2005. The paint was peeling, the stairs creaked, and Marcus could hear his neighbor's television through the walls. But the rent was cheap. Well, it had been cheap until he'd fallen 2 months behind. Inside, the girls dumped their backpacks and immediately gravitated to the small table by the window where Marcus had set up their homework station. A lamp he'd rewired, pencils in a coffee can, and construction paper he'd gotten from the dollar store. He watched them settle in, their small heads bent over worksheets, and felt that familiar ache in his chest. They deserved so much more than this. He opened the refrigerator. Half a gallon of milk, some eggs, the end of a loaf of bread, peanut butter, and not much else. He'd get paid in 3 days if he still had a job by then. In the meantime, Breakfast for dinner it was. As the eggs cooked, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "This Marcus?" A gruff voice, older. "Yeah, who's this?" "Name's Walter. I'm the county auctioneer. You inquired about that property listing last week, the Victorian over on Ashford Hill?" Marcus's heart jumped. He had inquired late one night, half drunk on exhaustion and desperation. He'd seen the listing posted at the hardware store. Estate auction, historic Victorian mansion, Ashford Hill, serious inquiries only. He'd called the number, left a message, and promptly forgotten about it because people like him didn't buy houses. They barely kept apartments. "I remember," Marcus said carefully. "Auction's tomorrow at 10 a.m. You planning to come?" "I don't know. What's the starting bid?" Walter chuckled dryly. "Son, I'll be straight with you. That house has been sitting empty for 43 years. Town's been trying to offload it for decades. Starting bid is $500. If you got that, you could walk away with the whole property. $500. Marcus had $632 in his checking account. That was supposed to get them through the next week and a half. "Why so cheap?" he asked. There had to be a catch. "House has a reputation. Previous owner vanished without a trace in 1981. Before that, there were some incidents. Town folks got superstitious about it. Place has been sealed up, condemned really. Needs extensive work, but the bones are good and the land's worth something." Marcus looked at his daughters, still focused on their homework. Emma was helping Lily sound out a word. The eviction notice was tucked in his pocket, burning like a brand. "I'll be there," he heard himself say. "Good. Bring cash or a cashier's check. And Marcus, don't let the ghost stories scare you off. It's just a house." The call ended. Marcus stared at his phone, his mind racing. This was insane. He couldn't buy a house. He could barely buy groceries. But the alternative was what? Another apartment he'd eventually get evicted from? Another year of watching his daughters grow up in instability? "Daddy?" Emma stood beside him, so quiet he hadn't heard her approach. "Is everything okay?" He knelt down to her level, brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. She had Sarah's eyes, kind and worried. "Yeah, baby, everything's going to be okay, I promise." That night, after the girls were asleep in the single bedroom, he took the couch, always had. Marcus sat in the dark and did the math. If he withdrew everything, paid for the house, they'd have $132 left for food, gas, and whatever emergencies came up before his next paycheck, if he still got a next paycheck. It was reckless. It was crazy. But maybe crazy was what they needed. He pulled up his laptop and searched for information about the house on Ashford Hill. What he found made his blood run cold. Article after article about the disappearance of Samuel Hartwell, Jr. in 1981. Before that, the mysterious death of his father, Samuel Hartwell, Sr., in 1947, ruled a heart attack, but the rumor mill suggested otherwise. Before that, a maid who'd fallen down the stairs in 1936. A gardener who'd vanished in 1923. The house had a body count, or at least a missing persons count. Marcus clicked through blurry photos of the Victorian mansion. Even in decay, it was stunning. 3 stories of stone and dark wood, with a tower on the east side and elaborate gingerbread trim. The kind of place that spoke of old money and older secrets. In one photo from the 1970s, he could see someone standing in an upper window. Just a shadow, really, but it made the hair on his arms stand up. He was about to close the laptop when he found one more article, this one from a local history blog. It detailed the Hartwell family's rise and fall. Samuel Hartwell Sr. had made his fortune in railroads and real estate, becoming one of the wealthiest men in the state by the 1920s. But he'd been reclusive, paranoid even. He'd built the mansion as a fortress, installing unusual security measures and architectural oddities. When he died, his son inherited everything but became even more isolated than his father. The final line of the article made Marcus pause. Neighbors reported that Samuel Jr. could sometimes be heard talking to himself in the house late at night, as if arguing with someone who wasn't there. He told one visitor that the house held secrets his father had taken to the grave and that he'd spent his entire adult life trying to find them. Marcus closed the laptop. Tomorrow he'd either make the smartest decision of his life or the worst mistake. There was no way to know which. The next morning dawned cold and gray, the kind of October day where autumn finally admits it's dying. Marcus called in sick to work, another absence he couldn't afford, and packed the girls into the truck. They thought they were going on an adventure, and he let them believe it. Ashford Hill rose above Millbrook like a forgotten monument, its narrow, winding road lined with oak trees that had stood for centuries. The houses up here were old money, or had been once. Now most sat empty or half-collapsed, victims of time and economic collapse. The Victorian mansion stood at the very top, surrounded by an iron fence choked with ivy. Marcus pulled through the rusted gates and stopped, staring up at the structure. It was massive. 3 stories of weathered gray stone and dark wood, with that tower on one corner reaching toward low-hanging clouds. The windows were intact but dark, like closed eyes. The wraparound porch sagged in places, and the front steps were cracked, but there was something about it, a dignity, a presence, that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Whoa," Lily breathed from the back seat. "It looks like a castle." "It looks haunted," Emma whispered. A few other cars were already there. Marcus recognized Walter standing by a folding table, papers spread out before him. 2 other men stood nearby, looking skeptical. One woman, older with sharp eyes, examined the house with the expression of someone calculating renovation costs. Marcus got out, told the girls to stay in the truck, and approached. "Marcus," Walter nodded. "Glad you came. We got a few others interested, but honestly, I think this is going to go quick. Place scares most folks off." One of the men, wearing a flannel jacket and work boots, shook his head. "I drove 2 hours to look at this place. You said it was a deal, Walter." "You didn't say it was a death trap." "Structure's sound," Walter insisted. "Had it inspected 5 years back. Foundation's solid, roof needs work but it ain't caving in. Plumbing's probably shot, electrical definitely needs updating, but the bones are good." "Bones don't mean much when you're talking about a place where people vanished," the woman said dryly. She turned to her car. "I'm out." The 2 men followed. Within minutes, only Marcus remained. Walter sighed. "Happens every time. Towns tried to auction this place off 7 times in the last 20 years. Same story. People show up, take one look, remember the stories, and run." "What stories exactly?" Marcus asked. Walter shuffled his papers. "You want the official version or the one people whisper about in bars?" "Both. Official version. Samuel Hartwell, Jr. lived here alone from 1947 until 1981. Kept to himself. Didn't socialize. One day in mid-October of 81, his mail started piling up. After 3 weeks, sheriff did a welfare check. Found the house locked up tight from the inside, no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. But Hartwell was gone. Never found a body. Never found a trace. County took possession in 82 after the mandatory waiting period. And the unofficial version? Walter's expression darkened. People say Samuel Jr. was looking for something his father hid, something valuable, and that whoever else was looking for it got to him first. Some say he found it and ran. Others say he found it and it killed him. Few folks claim to have seen lights in the windows over the years, even though the place has been sealed. Others say they hear sounds coming from inside. Most people just stay away. Marcus looked up at the house. In the gray morning light, it seemed less menacing and more sad, like an old dog that had been abandoned and didn't understand why. "I'm still interested," Marcus said. Walter studied him for a long moment. "You got kids in that truck?" "Twin daughters, 8 years old. And you're thinking of moving them into this place? I'm thinking of giving them a home instead of an apartment we're about to get evicted from. I'm thinking about taking a chance on something everyone else is too scared to touch. Maybe I'm stupid, or maybe I'm desperate enough to see opportunity where others see ghosts. Walter nodded slowly. Desperation and stupidity look awful similar sometimes. He pulled out a folder. All right then, let's make this official. As county auctioneer, I'm authorized to sell this property to the highest bidder. Starting bid is $500. Since you're the only one here, I'll ask once. Do you bid $500? Marcus's mouth was dry. Yes. Do I hear $600? Silence, just the wind rattling through dead leaves. $500 going once. Walter paused. Going twice. His gavel cracked against the table. Sold to Marcus for $500. Just like that, Marcus owned a mansion. The paperwork took 30 minutes. Marcus wrote the check with shaking hands, watching his bank balance in his mind drop to $132. Walter handed him a ring of old keys, some of them so tarnished they looked medieval. Place has been sealed since the county took possession, Walter explained. We sent inspectors through once about 15 years back. Structures sound enough, but there's water damage, electrical's probably shot, and God knows what else. Previous owners' belongings are still inside. County couldn't locate any heirs, so it all comes with the property. What happened to the father, the first Samuel? Heart attack, supposedly. 1947. Found him in his study, slumped over his desk. But here's the thing, he was only 52 and healthy as a horse. Some folks thought it was poison, others said it was the stress of whatever he was involved in. The man was rich as sin, but paranoid as hell. Built this place like a fortress. Supposedly had all kinds of hidden rooms and secret passages. His son spent 34 years trying to figure out his father's secrets and ended up vanishing just like the old man's money did. The money vanished too? Oh yeah. Samuel Sr. was worth millions, maybe tens of millions back in the 40s, but when he died, they couldn't find most of it. Bank accounts were nearly empty. Investments had been liquidated. Some thought he'd hidden it all, others thought he'd been swindled. Junior inherited the house and not much else. He lived off what little was left until that ran out too. Marcus stared at the massive key in his hand. Sounds like both of them were chasing something they never found. Maybe, Walter said. Or maybe one of them did find it and that's what got him killed. He closed his folder. Look, I shouldn't say this, but you seem like a good man in a bad spot. Be careful in there. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe that house has seen some dark things. Keep your girls close, trust your gut, and if something feels wrong, get out. That's not exactly reassuring. Walter shrugged. You bought a house for $500. You weren't looking for reassurance. You were looking for a miracle. He wasn't wrong. Marcus returned to the truck where both girls had their faces pressed against the windows, breath fogging the glass. Did you buy it? Lily asked as soon as he opened the door. Yeah, Bug. I bought it. We live there now? Emma asked quietly. We live there now. They approached the front door together, Marcus in the lead, each girl holding one of his hands. The porch groaned under their weight but held. The massive oak door stood before them, its surface carved with elaborate designs, flowers, vines, and symbols Marcus didn't recognize. The key was iron, heavy, elaborately carved with patterns that matched the door. It slid into the lock with surprising ease, as if it had been oiled recently, though that was impossible. Marcus turned the key. The lock clicked. The door swung open on hinges that barely creaked, revealing a grand foyer that stole Marcus's breath. Even covered in dust, even draped in shadows from the overcast day, it was magnificent. A sweeping staircase curved up to the second floor, its banister carved from dark wood so detailed it looked like lace made solid. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their prisms dulled by decades of neglect, but still beautiful. To the left, a parlor with furniture covered in white sheets. To the right, what looked like a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves still filled with leather-bound books. The floor was hardwood, intricate parquet patterns still visible beneath the layer of dust. The walls were papered in a Victorian style that had faded but not rotted, and everywhere, the craftsmanship was extraordinary. Crown molding, ceiling medallions, hand-carved details that spoke of a time when people built things to last forever. "Daddy," Lily whispered, her usual exuberance subdued by the weight of the space. "People really lived here?" "Yeah, bug, they did." They stepped inside together, their footsteps echoing off the hardwood floors. Marcus's trained eye took in the details. The plaster walls had cracks but no major damage. The woodwork, though dusty, was solid. Someone had built this place to last. But there was something else too, something Marcus couldn't quite name. The air felt different here, not stale like he'd expected, but almost preserved. Like the house had been waiting, and despite 43 years of being sealed, there was no smell of rot or mold. Just dust and old wood and something else. Something like cinnamon and tobacco and old leather. They explored slowly, room by room. The kitchen was a time capsule from the early 80s. Avocado green appliances, linoleum floors, but underneath it all, the original Victorian bones. A massive cast-iron stove sat in one corner. The sink was porcelain, deep enough to bathe a child in. The dining room took Marcus's breath away. A table made of mahogany sat in the center, set for dinner, plates still in place, crystal glasses catching the dim light, candles in silver holders burned down to nothing. It was like someone had set this table and then vanished mid-preparation. "This is creepy," Emma said quietly, and Marcus had to agree. A music room held a grand piano, its surface covered in dust, but the wood still gleaming underneath. Lily reached out and pressed a key. The note rang out, surprisingly in tune, echoing through the empty house. They found a study lined with bookshelves, a massive desk dominating the center. Papers were scattered across its surface. Marcus could see handwriting, drawings, what looked like mathematical equations. A leather chair sat behind the desk, worn smooth from years of use. Upstairs, bedroom after bedroom, each one decorated in styles from different eras. One room was clearly original to the house, heavy Victorian furniture, dark wallpaper, thick curtains. Another was from the 20s with Art Deco touches and geometric patterns. A third from the 50s, frozen in time with a rotary phone still sitting on the nightstand, and a calendar on the wall permanently stuck on October 1981. "It's like a museum," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying an edge of wonder, but for a whole house. The second floor had 6 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a long hallway with windows overlooking the overgrown garden. At the far end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. Marcus pushed it open to reveal a narrow staircase leading up. "The tower!" Lily breathed. They climbed together, the stairs creaking under their weight. The tower room at the top was circular, windows on all sides providing a 360-degree view of Millbrook spread out below. Marcus could see the whole town from here. The dying downtown, the abandoned mill, the elementary school where he'd picked up his daughters just yesterday. It felt like looking down from another world. In the center of the room sat a telescope on a brass stand, still pointed toward the night sky. Around it, star charts covered the walls, hand-drawn constellations with notes in careful handwriting. "Someone loved the stars," Emma said, running her fingers along one of the charts. They descended and continued exploring. The third floor was smaller, just 4 rooms and a narrow hallway. 3 of the rooms were ordinary bedrooms, smaller than the ones below, probably servants' quarters originally. But the 4th room, at the very end of the hall, was different. The door was made of steel painted to look like wood. It had 3 separate locks, 2 combination locks and 1 keyhole. Marcus tried every key on his ring. None of them fit. "What's in there?" Lily asked, pressing her ear against the door. "Don't know, Bug. We'll figure it out." But Marcus felt a pull toward that locked door, a sense that whatever was behind it was important. Maybe even the answer to why this house had been left to rot for 43 years while holding so many beautiful things. By the time evening fell, they'd done a basic inventory. The house had electricity, but Marcus didn't dare turn it on without having an electrician check the wiring first. The water was shut off at the main. The heating system looked like something from the early 1900s, but the structure was sound, the roof wasn't leaking, and there was furniture, dishes, linens, everything they needed to survive while they figured things out. Marcus had brought sleeping bags, a camping stove, and enough supplies for a few days. They set up camp in one of the second-floor bedrooms that seemed the cleanest. The girls thought it was the greatest adventure of their lives, sleeping in a castle with their dad. He made dinner on the camping stove, ramen noodles and canned peaches, while the girls explored their new room by flashlight. They found an old dollhouse in the closet and a box of vintage toys that made them squeal with delight. After dinner, after stories, after tucking them into their sleeping bags, Marcus stood at the bedroom window and looked out over the property. The garden was a jungle of overgrown roses and wild vines. The carriage house in back had partially collapsed. The iron fence around the property was rusted and broken in places. It would take years to restore this place properly, years he didn't have and money he didn't possess, but for tonight they had a roof over their heads, they had shelter, they had hope. Marcus was about to turn away from the window when he saw it. A flicker of light in one of the downstairs windows. Just for a second, like someone had walked past with a candle. His heart hammered. He counted windows from the front door, the study. He grabbed his flashlight and crept downstairs, careful not to wake the girls. The house was different at night, shadows deeper, sounds louder. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like whispers. The study door was closed. Marcus was certain he'd left it open. He pushed it slowly, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The room was empty. The papers on the desk were exactly as he'd seen them before. The leather chair sat vacant, but the air felt different, warmer, like someone had just been there. And on the desk, something caught his eye. One of the papers had been moved. It now sat directly in the center of the desk, squared perfectly, as if someone had placed it there deliberately for him to find. Marcus approached slowly and picked it up. It was a hand-drawn map of the house, but it didn't match the house he'd just explored. There were rooms marked that didn't exist, stairways that led nowhere, spaces between walls that seemed too large, and in the tower, written in faded ink, a single phrase, "Where angels sing and the sun never sets." Marcus's skin prickled. He turned slowly, sweeping his flashlight across the room. He was alone, but he didn't feel alone. From somewhere deep in the house came a sound, a low, rhythmic thumping like someone knocking on wood. It came from above, from the third floor, from the direction of that locked door. Thump, 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 then silence. Marcus stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to grab his daughters and run. But he'd spent his last $500 on this house. He had nowhere to run to. This was their home now, mysteries and all. He climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight trembling in his hand. The third-floor hallway was pitch black, the windows at either end reflecting his light back like eyes. He approached the locked steel door. The thumping had stopped, but now he could hear something else. A faint humming, mechanical, like a fan or motor running somewhere beyond the door. Marcus pressed his ear against the cold steel. The humming continued, steady and low. Then, just for a moment, he heard something else. Something that made his blood run cold. A voice. Faint, distorted, as if played through old speakers or echoing from a great distance. "Protect it until someone worthy finds it!" Marcus jerked back from the door. His flashlight flickered. For one terrible second he stood in complete darkness. Then the light came back on. The hallway was empty. The humming had stopped. The house was silent again, holding its breath. Marcus backed away from the door and returned to the bedroom where his daughters slept peacefully, unaware. He checked the window locks, pushed a chair against the door, and sat in the corner with his flashlight, knowing he wouldn't sleep tonight. The house had secrets, big secrets, dangerous secrets, and Marcus had just spent his last dollar buying his way into a mystery that had consumed two men's lives and might very well consume his. But as he watched his daughters sleep, their faces peaceful in the glow of his flashlight, he made a decision. Whatever was behind that locked door, whatever had happened in this house, whatever dangers waited in its shadows, he would face them, because he didn't have a choice. This was their home now, their chance, their hope. And Marcus had never been one to run from a fight, especially when his daughters' futures were on the line. The house groaned and settled around them, and somewhere in its depths, secrets waited to be found. Tomorrow, Marcus would start looking for answers. Tonight, he would stand guard. Because in this old Victorian mansion on Ashford Hill, nothing was as it seemed, and everything was about to change. The first week in the Victorian was a blur of exhaustion and discovery. Marcus had kept his job, barely, by explaining his situation to his boss, who grudgingly gave him flexible hours as long as the work got done. So Marcus became a creature of brutal routine. Wake before dawn, work on the mansion's most urgent repairs before light, get the girls ready for school, drive them down the hill, work his shifts for Dalton Properties, pick up the girls, work on the mansion until dark, collapse into his sleeping bag, and repeat. His body screamed in protest. His hands were covered in cuts and calluses. His back ached from crawling through crawl spaces and hauling debris. But slowly, painfully, the house was coming alive. He'd gotten the water running on day 3, ancient pipes that groaned and rattled but held. The electrical system was a nightmare of cloth-wrapped wiring and outdated fuse boxes, so he focused on making one circuit safe enough to power lights in their bedroom and the kitchen. He patched the worst roof leaks with tar paper and prayer. He cleared the kitchen of decades of grime until the original black and white tile floor emerged like an archaeological find. The girls had adjusted faster than he'd expected. Lily treated the whole thing as an adventure, exploring every corner, naming rooms, creating elaborate games that involved the entire mansion as her kingdom. Emma was more reserved, but she'd started sketching floor plans and making lists of what each room needed, her methodical mind finding comfort in organization. It was Emma who found the first hidden compartment. Marcus was in the kitchen, elbow deep in the cabinet under the sink, trying to stop a persistent drip, when he heard her call from the library. "Dad, come look at this!" He found both girls in the library, Emma standing on a chair, her small fingers pressed against the wall beside one of the bookshelves. "What did you find, baby?" "Watch." Emma pushed, and a section of the dark wood paneling swung inward with a soft click, revealing a narrow compartment about 2 feet wide and 4 feet tall. Marcus's heart hammered. "How did you find that?" "The wall sounded different when I knocked on it, hollow, and I saw a tiny gap in the trim, so I pushed." Inside the compartment were stacks of old newspapers, carefully preserved, dating from the 1920s through the 1940s. Underneath them, wrapped in oilcloth, were photographs. Marcus lifted them carefully, his carpenter's hands suddenly gentle. The photos showed a stern-looking man in a 3-piece suit standing in front of various buildings. Sometimes he was alone, sometimes with other men in similar formal attire. On the back of each photo, someone had written dates and locations in precise handwriting: Chicago, 1923, New York, 1931, Millbrook, 1945. "That's Samuel Hartwell Sr., Marcus said, recognizing the face from his late-night internet research. "The man who built this house." "He looks sad," Lily observed, peering over his shoulder. She was right. Despite the formal poses, despite the expensive clothes, there was something haunted in the man's eyes. A wariness, a weight. At the bottom of the compartment, Marcus found something else, a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked with age. He opened it carefully. The first page read, "Property of Samuel Hartwell, Jr., January 1965. Marcus's breath caught. This was the son's journal, the man who'd vanished. He flipped through the pages, seeing dense handwriting, sketches, notes in the margins. "Can we read it?" Emma asked. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Yeah, I think we need to." That night, after the girls were asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, one of the few places with working electricity, and began reading. The early entries were mundane, almost boring. Notes about managing the property, complaints about the town council, observations about the weather. But starting in 1978, the tone shifted dramatically. June 15, 1978, found father's old correspondence today, hidden behind a false panel in his bedroom. Letters dating back to 1926. He was involved in things I never suspected. Business dealings that went far beyond railroads and real estate. Money moving through channels that shouldn't exist. And repeatedly, references to the insurance, a fortune he claimed to be building as protection against economic collapse. He saw the Depression coming years before it hit. He predicted the war. He converted everything, stocks, properties, cash, into something more permanent. But he never told me where he put it. Marcus leaned back, his mind racing. A hidden fortune. That's what Samuel Sr. had been protecting. He kept reading. September 3, 1978. The blueprints don't match. I measured every room, every hallway, every closet. The house should be 32 feet wider than it is. There are spaces that don't exist. Father built this place as a puzzle, and I'm finally starting to understand. Every room has two purposes, the obvious one and the hidden one. The question is, which rooms hide the most important secrets? January 7, 1979. Someone broke into the house last night while I slept. I heard them moving downstairs, searching. They were careful, professional. Nothing was taken because they don't know what they're looking for. But they know something is here. They've been watching. Father's old business partners, perhaps? Or their sons? People who believe they were cheated, who think father hid their share of the profits. I've started varying my routine, sleeping in different rooms each night. I won't make it easy for them. The entries grew more paranoid, more desperate. Samuel Jr. described installing additional locks, creating false trails, setting traps. He wrote about finding coded letters from his father, messages that required keys he didn't possess. He documented every architectural anomaly in the house, walls that were too thick, stairs that led nowhere, rooms whose dimensions didn't add up. March 22, 1981. I found another clue today. Father left me a riddle buried in his papers. When you need to find what's lost, look where the angels sing and the sun never sets. I thought he was being poetic, but now I understand. Everything in this house is literal. The music room, the tower, the stained glass. He's telling me where to look, but I still don't understand how to see. October 10, 1981. They're getting closer. I can feel them watching. Last night, someone tried the locks on the 3rd floor. I heard them at 3 a.m., testing each door. They left before I could confront them. I don't have much time left. If I can't solve Father's puzzle before they figure it out, everything he worked for will be lost to the very people he was protecting it from. I've started writing down everything I know, everything I've discovered, in case someone else needs to continue the search. The journal ended on October 16, 1981. The day before, Samuel Jr. vanished. The final entry was short. I know what I have to do. I know where to look. If I'm right, Father's fortune is still here, still safe. If I'm wrong, I'm about to walk into a trap. Either way, it ends tonight. To whoever finds this journal, trust no one who claims they have a right to what's in this house. Father chose to hide it for a reason. If you found this place, If you solved even part of his puzzle, then maybe you're the one he was waiting for." Marcus closed the journal, his hands trembling. The disappearance wasn't random. Samuel Jr. had known something was about to happen. Had he found the fortune? Had he been killed for it? Had he run? Over the next few days, Marcus's focus shifted. He still did the essential repairs. The house needed to be livable, but his mind was consumed by the mystery. He started noticing things he'd missed before, the way certain floorboards were newer than others, as if they'd been replaced. The fact that some walls, when he knocked on them, sounded hollow when they shouldn't be, the odd placement of some doors and windows. The girls had their own discoveries. Lily found a music box in one of the bedrooms, ornate and beautiful, that played a haunting melody when wound. Emma discovered that one of the bookcases in the library wasn't actually attached to the wall. It was on hidden hinges and could swing open, though it only revealed a shallow storage space filled with old magazines. "Dad," Emma said one evening as they ate dinner, spaghetti cooked on the camping stove, "have you noticed that the tower room is bigger on the inside than it should be?" Marcus paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I measured. From the outside, the tower is maybe 12 feet across, but inside it's at least 15 feet. The walls are too thick." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Show me." After dinner, they climbed to the tower room. Marcus brought his tape measure and did his own calculations. Emma was right. The walls were at least 18 inches thicker than they needed to be for a stone structure. And when he knocked on them, they sounded hollow in places. "There's something inside the walls," he said quietly. "A secret room?" Lily asked, eyes wide. "Maybe, or maybe just insulation or infrastructure, but maybe something else." He spent that evening examining every inch of the tower room, running his hands along the stone, looking for seams or triggers or any sign of how to access whatever might be hidden. He found nothing. If there was a way in, it was too well disguised for him to find. But the search had awakened something in Marcus, an obsession he couldn't shake. He started spending his nights poring over Samuel Jr.'s journal, rereading passages, looking for clues. He made his own notes, drew his own floor plans, calculated dimensions and angles. The financial pressure mounted despite having a roof over their heads. The $132 he'd had left after buying the house was long gone. His paycheck barely covered food and gas. The hardware store owner, Carl, had been generous with credit, but Marcus knew he couldn't keep taking supplies without paying. The church ladies still brought casseroles, bless them, but Marcus felt the weight of charity growing heavier. One morning he found an eviction notice from his old apartment taped to his truck windshield. He'd forgotten about breaking the lease. They were suing him for 3 months' rent plus penalties, over $2,000 he didn't have. That night, Emma found him sitting in the study, head in his hands, surrounded by bills and Samuel Jr.'s journal. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" He looked up at his daughter, at her worried face, and forced a smile he didn't feel. "Yeah, baby. We're going to figure it out." "Is it about money?" He couldn't lie to her. She was too smart for that. "Yeah, it's always about money." "But we have a house now." "We have a house that needs tens of thousands of dollars in repairs I can't afford. We have property taxes I don't know how to pay. We have a mystery I can't solve and problems I can't fix." Emma climbed onto his lap, too big for it really, but Marcus held her anyway. "Maybe we're not supposed to fix everything," she said quietly. "Maybe we're just supposed to figure out one thing at a time." She was right. He was drowning in the enormity of it all. The house, the mystery, the money, the ghosts of 2 dead men who'd failed to solve the same puzzle. He needed to focus. "Okay," he said. "One thing at a time. Let's figure out what Samuel Sr. was trying to hide." The breakthrough came 2 weeks after they'd moved in. Marcus was repairing a broken window in the music room when Lily wandered in with her music box. "Dad, watch this!" She wound the key and set the box on the floor in the exact center of the room. The haunting melody filled the space, and suddenly light began to dance across the ceiling. Not random light, a pattern projected through tiny holes in the music box's decorative metalwork. Marcus stopped working and stared up. The pattern wasn't just pretty, it was deliberate. Numbers, letters, a code written in light. "Emma," he called, "bring paper and a pencil." For the next hour they documented the pattern as the music box played over and over. 7 different sequences of numbers and letters appeared as the mechanism rotated. Marcus wrote them all down: 7 3 9 6 2 8 W H E R E A N G E L S S I N G S U N N E V E R S E T S. "Where angels sing, sun never sets," Emma read. "That's from the journal, Mr. Samuel Jr.'s father's riddle." Marcus's heart pounded. The music box isn't just a music box. It's a key. A literal key to solving the riddle. "But what does it open?" Lily asked. "The door on the 3rd floor," Marcus said, certainty flooding through him. "The one with the combination locks." They rushed to the 3rd floor, Marcus carrying the slip of paper with the numbers. The steel door waited at the end of the hallway, its 3 locks mocking him as they had for 2 weeks. The first lock was a combination dial. Marcus's fingers trembled as he turned it. 7 3 9. Click. The lock opened. "Oh my God," he whispered. The second lock, 6 2 8. Click. 2 down, 1 to go. The third lock was different, just a keyhole, old-fashioned and small. Marcus tried every key on his ring. None fit. He cursed under his breath, so close but still locked out. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. "Wait," Emma said. She ran back downstairs and returned minutes later with the music box. She turned it over, examining the decorative base. "Look." Hidden in the intricate metalwork, so small Marcus had never noticed it, was a tiny key, no bigger than his thumbnail. Emma worked it free carefully and handed it to her father. "Try it." Marcus's hand shook as he slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. He turned it, heard the mechanism click, and the door swung open. Behind it wasn't a room. It was a staircase, narrow and steep, leading up into darkness. Cold air rushed down from above, carrying that same smell Marcus had noticed throughout the house. Cinnamon and tobacco and old leather, but stronger now, concentrated. "Stay close to me," Marcus said, pulling out his flashlight. They climbed together, the wooden stairs creaking under their weight. The staircase seemed to go up forever, much higher than should be possible given the house's structure. Marcus counted 53 steps before they reached another door at the top. This door wasn't locked. It opened easily, almost eagerly, as if it had been waiting. The space beyond made Marcus forget how to breathe. They were standing in a hidden attic that spanned the entire footprint of the house, a massive space that shouldn't exist according to the building's external dimensions. But it did exist, and it was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls were steel, painted white, with rivets like the inside of a ship's hull. The ceiling was at least 12 feet high, supported by steel beams. The floor was reinforced concrete, and the whole space had an industrial, vault-like quality that contrasted sharply with the Victorian elegance below. But what filled the space was what stole Marcus's breath. Wooden crates, dozens of them, stacked neatly against the walls. Metal trunks with brass fittings. Filing cabinets, at least 20 of them, arranged in precise rows. And in the very center of the room, sitting on a mahogany table that seemed absurdly elegant in this utilitarian space, was a single envelope sealed with red wax. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive paper, and it was addressed in elegant handwriting. "To whoever finds this, you've earned the truth." Marcus approached slowly. Emma and Lily pressed close to his sides. His fingers trembled as he broke the wax seal and pulled out the letter inside. It was dated October 17th, 1981, the day before Samuel Jr. vanished. Marcus read aloud, his voice echoing in the steel-walled chamber. "If you're reading this, then I failed. They caught me before I could do what my father asked, or I ran out of time, or perhaps I simply lost my nerve. Regardless, the responsibility passes to you now." My father, Samuel Hartwell Sr., spent his entire adult life accumulating wealth, not out of greed, but out of fear. He lived through the panic of 1907, watched the world tear itself apart in the Great War, and saw the Depression coming years before it arrived. He believed deeply that society was fragile, that paper money was worthless, and that the only true security was tangible assets that couldn't be seized or devalued. So he built an insurance policy. For 30 years, from 1917 until his death in 1947, he quietly converted his wealth into things that would survive any economic catastrophe: gold, silver, artwork, rare bonds, currency from multiple nations and eras. He stored it all here, in this sealed chamber he built into the house's design. But he made one critical error. He died suddenly before teaching me how to access it. He left me clues, riddles, puzzles scattered throughout the house. He wanted to ensure that only someone clever enough, persistent enough, deserving enough would find it. I spent 34 years trying to solve his puzzles. I came so close. But now my time is up, and I'm either about to succeed or die trying. What you'll find here is worth approximately $260 million by my last calculation. Perhaps more, perhaps less. The exact amount matters less than the principle. This fortune was hidden to protect it from those who would use it selfishly. My father believed that wealth concentrated in the hands of the already wealthy was dangerous. He wanted this money to eventually help those who truly needed it. If you found this place, if you solved the puzzles, then you demonstrated something important. You have the intelligence to understand complex problems, the persistence to not give up when things are difficult, and the courage to take risks others won't take. These qualities, my father believed, indicate character. The fortune is yours now. Do with it what you will. But I ask, as my father would have asked, that you use it wisely. Help those who need help. Build something that matters. Don't hoard it like some dragons sitting on gold. Let it flow back into the world in ways that create opportunities for others. Be careful, though. There are people who've spent decades searching for this fortune. Some of them killed my father, though it was ruled natural causes. Some of them have been watching this house, waiting. They won't stop just because you found what they've been seeking. Protect yourself. Protect what's here. And when you're ready, use it to make the world a little less cruel. Samuel Hartwell Jr., October 17th, 1981. Silence filled the vault. Marcus read the letter twice more, his mind unable to fully process the words. $260 million. Hidden in the house he'd bought for $800. Protected by a dead man's puzzles, waiting for someone, for him, to find it. "Is it real?" Emma whispered. Marcus looked around the vault, really seeing it now. Each crate was labeled with careful handwriting. Each trunk had an inventory tag. Each filing cabinet had a brass plate indicating its contents. This wasn't some fantasy, this was real, meticulously organized, waiting. He approached the nearest crate and carefully pried open the lid. Inside, wrapped in protective cloth, were gold bars, dozens of them gleaming in his flashlight beam, each one stamped with dates from the 1920s and 30s. The next crate held stacks of currency, bills from different eras, different countries, all perfectly preserved. Another held bonds, thousands of them, each one worth potentially tens of thousands of dollars if they could be authenticated and redeemed. Marcus opened a trunk and found jewelry. Not costume jewelry, but the real thing. Diamond necklaces, gold watches, platinum bracelets, all wrapped carefully and catalogued with precision. The filing cabinets held documents, stock certificates from companies Marcus recognized, some of which had become massive corporations. Artwork carefully preserved between sheets of acid-free paper. Rare coins in protective sleeves. Maps, deeds, titles to properties that might still exist somewhere. And everywhere, Samuel Sr.'s obsessive organization. Every item catalogued, every piece documented, years and years of work, decades of careful accumulation and protection. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice broke through Marcus's daze. "Does this mean we're not poor anymore?" Marcus knelt down between his daughters, pulling them both close. His throat was tight, his eyes burning. "I don't know, Bug. I don't know what this means yet. But I promise you, whatever happens, we're going to be okay." He thought about the eviction notice from his old apartment, the credit he owed at the hardware store, the property taxes coming due, the repairs the house desperately needed. All of it suddenly seemed so small, so manageable compared to the fortune surrounding them. But he also thought about Samuel Sr.'s wishes, about help those who need help, about using wealth to make the world less cruel. And he thought about how, just weeks ago, he'd been one of those people who needed help. He'd been desperate, drowning, invisible. "We can't tell anyone about this," Marcus said firmly. "Not yet. Not until I understand what we're dealing with and how to protect it. And protect you." "Someone was looking for this," Emma said quietly, always understanding more than she should. "The people who made Mr. Samuel Jr. disappear. They'll still be looking." She was right. And now Marcus had become the keeper of a secret that had gotten at least one man killed and another disappeared. He'd thought buying this house was the end of his problems. Now he realized it was just the beginning. They spent the next hour examining the vault more carefully. Marcus found detailed inventory lists in one of the filing cabinets, Samuel Jr.'s obsessive documentation of his father's collection. The conservative estimate of $260 million might have been low. Some of these assets had appreciated far beyond what either man could have predicted. There was also a second filing cabinet marked Contingency Plans. Inside, Marcus found letters, legal documents, and instructions from Samuel Sr. dated from the 1940s. Addresses of law firms in Philadelphia, names of attorneys who might help with authentication and legal protection, instructions on how to gradually liquidate assets without drawing attention. It was all there, a roadmap left by a man who'd thought of everything. As they finally descended the hidden staircase, carefully locking each door behind them, Marcus's mind raced. He had a decision to make. He could keep this secret forever, slowly selling off pieces to survive, living in fear of discovery. Or he could trust someone, get legal help, and try to do what Samuel Sr. had wanted, use this fortune to help people. But who could he trust? Who wouldn't try to take it from him? Who would believe that a desperate handyman living in a condemned mansion had just discovered one of the largest hidden fortunes in American history? That night, Marcus barely slept. He lay in his sleeping bag, listening to his daughters breathe, and thought about everything that had led him to this moment. Sarah's death, the years of struggle, the day he'd seen that auction listing and made the desperate decision to spend his last dollars on hope. Maybe Samuel Sr. had been right. Maybe the puzzle wasn't just about being clever or persistent. Maybe it was about being desperate enough to take risks others wouldn't. About being broken enough to see opportunity in what others saw as ruins. About being worthy not through wealth or status, but through need and courage and the willingness to believe in impossible things. Marcus had solved the first puzzle. He'd found the vault. He'd discovered the fortune. Now came the harder part, figuring out what to do with it. And more importantly, how to survive long enough to make that choice. Because somewhere out there, the people Samuel Jr. had feared were still searching, still watching, still waiting for someone to lead them to what they'd been seeking for 40 years. And Marcus had just become exactly that person. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw gold bars gleaming in flashlight beams, stacks of currency from forgotten eras, and Samuel Jr.'s final words, $260 million. He lay in his sleeping bag on the floor of the second-floor bedroom, listening to his daughters breathe in their peaceful sleep, and tried to make sense of a world that had just shifted on its axis. 48 hours ago, he'd been a man who counted pennies at the gas station, who stretched meals until they were barely meals at all, who felt invisible in a world that had no use for broken people. Now he was lying in a mansion that held more wealth than he could comprehend, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The weight of it pressed down on his chest like a physical thing. This wasn't just money. This was responsibility. This was danger. This was a secret that had consumed two men's lives and might very well consume his. Around 3 a.m, Marcus gave up on sleep. He grabbed his flashlight and made his way back up to the 3rd floor, to that steel door, to the hidden staircase beyond. He needed to see it again, needed to confirm it was real and not some exhaustion-induced hallucination. The vault waited, silent and patient. Marcus stood in its center, slowly turning in a circle, his flashlight beams sweeping across crates and trunks and filing cabinets. In the harsh LED light, it all looked even more surreal. This industrial space hidden within a Victorian mansion, this fortune concealed within walls, this impossible secret. He approached one of the filing cabinets marked Documentation and Provenance. Inside, he found Samuel Sr.'s meticulous records dating back to 1917. Every purchase documented, every transaction recorded. The man had been obsessive, treating his hidden fortune like a museum collection. Marcus pulled out a thick folder labeled Gold Acquisitions, 1933 through 1942. Inside were receipts, certificates, and detailed notes. He learned that Samuel Sr. had started buying gold aggressively in 1933, right after Roosevelt had made private gold ownership illegal. The old man had been betting that the ban wouldn't last forever, and he'd been right. The gold he'd purchased for $35 an ounce was now worth over $1,500 an ounce. Another folder contained stock certificates from companies Marcus recognized. Early investments in IBM, Coca-Cola, General Electric, all purchased in the 1920s and 30s when they were risky bets. Samuel Sr. had been brilliant, buying into American industry when it was at its lowest point and holding on through decades of growth. But what struck Marcus most was a letter tucked into the back of one folder, written in Samuel Sr.'s elegant hand and addressed to his future self. December 1945. The war is over. The world survived, but barely. Millions dead, entire cities destroyed, and yet humanity endures. I've spent 30 years building this collection, convinced that civilization was one crisis away from collapse. But perhaps I was wrong about the end point. Perhaps the purpose wasn't to hide wealth from a dying world, but to preserve it for a world being reborn. If I die before I can distribute this fortune properly, I hope whoever finds it understands. Money hoarded is meaningless. Money used to rebuild, to heal, to give others a chance at the life I was fortunate enough to have. That's the only wealth that matters. Marcus's throat tightened. Samuel Sr. hadn't been a miser or a paranoid hoarder. He'd been a man trying to do something good in a world that kept proving how fragile goodness was. As dawn light began filtering through the small ventilation windows high in the vault walls, Marcus made himself do a complete inventory. Not because he needed to know the exact value, that almost didn't matter at this scale, but because he needed to understand the full scope of what he was dealing with. The gold bars, 347 of them, each 1 ounce, each one currently worth about $1,500. Over $500,000 in gold alone. The currency, organized by era and country. American bills from the 1800s through the 1970s, some of them rare enough to be worth far more than face value. foreign currency from countries that no longer existed. $6 million in face value, possibly worth multiples of that to collectors. The bonds, bearer bonds from before the government cracked down on anonymous instruments. Municipal bonds, corporate bonds, war bonds. $70 million in face value, most of them still valid and earning interest after all these decades. The artwork, 27 pieces carefully catalogued. Marcus recognized a few names from his limited knowledge, paintings that could be worth millions each if they were authentic. Samuel Sr.'s notes suggested they were. The jewelry, not the sentimental kind, but investment pieces, diamonds, platinum, gold, items bought for their material value rather than their beauty, though many were beautiful anyway. The stock certificates. This was where the fortune had really grown. Early investments in companies that had become giants. If these certificates were still valid, and Marcus had no idea if they were, they represented ownership stakes that had multiplied thousands of times over. By the time Marcus finished his rough calculation, the conservative estimate of $260 million seemed low. Depending on authenticity, current market values, and legal ownership status, this collection could be worth $300 million. Maybe more. The number was so large it stopped meaning anything. Marcus thought about his old apartment, the eviction notice, the $2,000 he owed that had felt like an insurmountable mountain. Now he was standing in a room where a single gold bar could pay that debt 50 times over. He sat down on the concrete floor, back against a crate, and let himself feel it. All of it. The relief that his daughters would never go hungry again. The terror of what this secret meant. The weight of Samuel Sr.'s trust. The ghost of Samuel Jr.'s warning. The impossible, crushing responsibility of deciding what came next. And then, for the first time in 3 years, Marcus wept. Not the quiet tears he'd hidden from his daughters when bills piled up. Not the stoic grief he'd felt at Sarah's funeral. He sobbed, great heaving gasps that echoed in the steel-walled chamber, releasing years of fear and exhaustion and desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, the universe didn't hate him after all. When he finally composed himself, the sun was fully up. He could hear the girls stirring downstairs, calling for him. Marcus wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, and climbed down from the vault. He locked each door carefully behind him, the music box's tiny key burning in his pocket like a talisman. "Dad?" Emma found him in the hallway, her hair tangled from sleep, wearing the same clothes she'd worn yesterday because they only had 2 changes of clothes each. "Where were you?" "Just checking on something." He pulled her into a hug. "You hungry?" They made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast cooked on the camping stove, and Marcus tried to act normal, but his mind was spinning through scenarios. He needed help, professional help, legal help. But who could he trust? Who would believe him? And more importantly, who wouldn't try to take it from him? The answer came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, while Marcus was trying to repair a broken window latch, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Marcus Blake?" "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Catherine Morse. I'm an attorney from Philadelphia. I specialize in estate law and asset recovery." Her voice was professional, measured, but with an undercurrent of urgency. "I believe you recently purchased the Hartwell mansion on Ashford Hill." Marcus's blood ran cold. "How did you know that?" "Real estate transactions are public record, Mr. Blake. The Hartwell property has been on my firm's watch list for 40 years. When it changed hands, I received an automated notification." "What do you want?" "To help you," Catherine said. "If you found what I think you found, you're in danger. The people who've been searching for Samuel Hartwell's hidden wealth don't give up easily. They're patient, they're ruthless, and they're coming." "Why should I trust you?" "Because 35 years ago, Samuel Hartwell Sr. hired my firm's founder to set up a contingency plan. If the vault was ever found by someone outside the family, we were instructed to provide legal protection and guidance. That someone is you, Mr. Blake. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. I need proof. I need to know you're who you say you are. Smart. Come to Philadelphia tomorrow. My office is on Walnut Street. Bring documentation of your purchase and I'll show you everything. The original contract Samuel Sr. signed with our firm, the instructions he left, the legal framework he created for exactly this situation. 9 a.m. Can you make it? Marcus thought about his daughters, about the dangers Catherine was hinting at, about the impossibility of navigating this alone. I'll be there. That night he explained to the girls that he had to take a trip the next day. Emma's eyes went wide with worry, but she nodded. Lily protested until Marcus promised to bring back pizza for dinner. He called his neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, who agreed to watch the girls despite the oddity of babysitting in a mostly empty mansion. Before he left the next morning, Marcus did something he'd been avoiding. He went back to Samuel Jr.'s journal and read the final entries more carefully, looking for warnings about who might come looking. What he found chilled him. October 10th, 1981. I know who they are now. Father's former business partners formed a group after his death, called themselves the Restoration Committee, though there was nothing restorative about them. They believed Father had cheated them, hidden assets that should have been shared. They've been searching for 40 years. Some have died, but their sons continue the search. 3 families, primarily. The Bridgewaters, the Holcombs, and the DeMarcos. Old money, old grudges, old entitlement. They hired investigators, bribed county officials, even broke in several times over the years. But they never found what Father hid because they were looking with greed instead of understanding. They wanted the fortune without earning it. Marcus photographed those pages with his phone. If Catherine Morse was legitimate, she'd need to know who was coming. The drive to Philadelphia took 3 hours. The city skyline appeared through morning haze, and Marcus felt completely out of his depth. He was a carpenter from a dying town, about to walk into a law office in one of the most expensive districts in the country, carrying secrets worth more than some country's GDP. Catherine Morse's office was in a converted townhouse on a tree-lined street that screamed old money. The receptionist, a young man in an expensive suit, showed Marcus to a conference room where Catherine waited. She was in her mid-60s, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. But her handshake was firm and her smile genuine. Mr. Blake, thank you for trusting me enough to come. I haven't decided to trust you yet, Marcus said honestly. Fair enough. Let me show you why you should. She opened a leather portfolio and began laying out documents. Contracts dating back to 1946. Letters from Samuel Hartwell Sr. to her firm's founder, a man named Richard Morse, Catherine's grandfather. Detailed instructions about the vault, about the wealth, about the contingency plan for when it was eventually discovered. Samuel Sr. was brilliant and paranoid in equal measure, Catherine explained. He knew the fortune couldn't stay hidden forever. He knew that eventually someone would find it, possibly someone from outside the family if his son failed to solve the puzzle. So he created a legal framework. If and when the vault was opened, my firm was to help the discoverer navigate the legal, financial, and security challenges. Why would he do that? Marcus asked, still skeptical. Why not just will it to his son? Catherine's expression softened. Because he understood his son's limitations. Samuel Jr. was fragile, paranoid, possibly mentally ill. The father knew the son might not be capable of handling the responsibility. So he created a backup plan that would ensure the fortune eventually went to someone who demonstrated worthiness, not through bloodline or social status, but through character. She pulled out a letter, yellowed with age, written in Samuel Sr.'s distinctive hand, to the Morse law firm. December 1946. If this letter is being read, then the vault has been found by someone other than my son. This means either Samuel Jr. failed to solve my puzzles, or he succeeded but was unable to claim what he found. or he never attempted the search at all. Regardless, I want you to help whoever discovered the vault with the following conditions. First, they must have legally purchased or inherited the property. No thieves or trespassers. Second, they must have solved the puzzles through intelligence and effort, not through force or destruction. Third, and most importantly, they must demonstrate financial need. The wealthy don't need more wealth. This fortune should go to someone who understands struggle, who knows that every dollar matters, who will use it to help rather than hoard. Help them, Catherine, as your family has helped mine. Make sure the fortune serves its purpose, giving second chances to those who deserve them. Marcus felt his throat close up. How do you know all this about me, about my situation? I did my research, Catherine said gently. Property records, employment history, credit reports, court records. I needed to know who had found the vault. And everything I learned told me Samuel Sr.'s system worked. You're exactly who he hoped would find it. Someone desperate enough to take a risk no one else would take. Someone resourceful enough to solve what others couldn't. Someone with dependents who needed you to succeed. A single father working multiple jobs, raising twin daughters alone, brave enough to invest your last dollars in hope. You're worthy, Mr. Blake. Samuel Sr. designed this entire system to find someone like you. Marcus wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe that this wasn't some elaborate scam, that there was actually a path forward through the legal minefield he'd walked into. What about the people Samuel Jr. wrote about? The Restoration Committee. Catherine's expression hardened. They're real. 3 families who believe they were cheated out of Samuel Sr.'s fortune. They've spent 4 decades searching. Some of them are still alive. Some have passed the obsession to their children. They hire investigators, they bribe officials, they use their considerable wealth and influence to continue the search. So what do I do? You let me help you establish legal ownership through the framework Samuel Sr. created. We'll set up a trust, ensure everything is properly documented, authenticated, and protected. We'll build a legal wall they can't penetrate. Then you decide what to do with the fortune. Some you'll keep, enough to give your family security. The rest, she gestured to another document. Samuel Sr. left suggestions. Charitable trusts, scholarships, community development funds. He wanted this money to help people, not sit in a vault forever. How much would I keep? That's entirely up to you. But I'd recommend enough to eliminate your financial stress. Pay off debts, secure housing, establish education funds for your daughters. Maybe $5 million? That leaves over $250 million for charitable purposes. $5 million. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. $5 million would mean never worrying about rent again, never choosing between food and medicine, never watching his daughters go without. It would mean security, stability, hope, but it would also mean responsibility and target on their backs. There's one more thing, Catherine said, pulling out a final document. Samuel Sr. anticipated that someone might find the vault before I could make contact. So he included one more failsafe, a second letter, sealed, to be opened only by the discoverer. According to his notes, it should be in the vault behind a loose brick in the northeast corner. Did you find it? Marcus shook his head slowly. I didn't know to look. Then you need to go back and find it, because that letter contains information that will change everything. It explains why Samuel Sr. created this fortune in the first place, what he truly hoped you would do with it, and, most importantly, it contains proof of legitimate ownership that will stand up in any court. Without that letter, your claim is vulnerable. With it, you're untouchable. 3 hours later, Marcus was driving back to Millbrook, his head spinning with legal terminology, trust documents, and the promise of protection Catherine had offered. But more than anything, he thought about that second letter still hidden in the vault, waiting to reveal one more secret. He arrived home just as dusk settled over Ashford Hill. Mrs. Garcia reported no problems, no strange visitors, and Marcus thanked her, paid her from his last $20 bill, and sent her home. The girls were in the living room doing homework by lamplight. "How was Philadelphia?" Emma asked.
"Complicated," Marcus admitted, "but maybe good. I met someone who might be able to help us."
That night, after the girls were asleep, Marcus climbed to the vault alone. He counted bricks in the northeast corner, examining each one carefully. On his third pass, he found it. A brick that was slightly looser than the others, set just a fraction deeper into the wall. He worked it free carefully. Behind it was a cavity, and inside the cavity was an envelope. Thick, heavy, sealed with the same red wax as the first letter. The envelope was addressed in Samuel Sr.'s handwriting, "To the one who proves worthy. The real fortune begins here." Marcus's hands trembled as he broke the seal and pulled out the letter inside. It was long, several pages written in careful script. He settled onto the floor of the vault, surrounded by hundreds of millions in hidden wealth, and began to read.
"Dear Finder,
if you're reading this, you've navigated my maze and earned access to what most would consider tremendous wealth. $260 million is more than any single person needs, more than most could spend in multiple lifetimes. You're probably wondering what to do with it. You're probably afraid. Good. Fear means you understand the responsibility, but I need you to understand something crucial. This money is not the fortune, it's merely the test. You see, wealth doesn't make a person worthy. Worthiness determines what one does with wealth. I created this entire puzzle not to hide money, but to find character. I needed to know that whoever discovered my life's work would have the integrity to use it properly. You had nothing, yet you invested what little you had into purchasing this house. That was courage. You worked to make it livable for your family despite overwhelming odds. That was determination. You solved the puzzle through observation and patience rather than force. That was wisdom. And most importantly, you brought your children with you into this mystery, treating them as partners rather than burdens. That was love.
These qualities cannot be bought. They're worth more than any amount of money, and they're exactly why I knew the right person would eventually find this place."
Now comes your real test. What will you do with what you've found? Will you hoard it? Will you spend it on yourself? Or will you understand, as I did too late in my own life, that money's only value is in what it can do for others? I built this fortune during the Depression, watching families lose everything while those with wealth grew wealthier. I saw children go hungry. I saw good people destroyed by circumstances beyond their control. It broke something in me. I vowed that if I ever accumulated significant assets, they would serve a purpose beyond my own comfort. But I died before fulfilling that vow properly, and my son spent his whole life too paralyzed by fear to honor it. Don't repeat our mistakes. Don't let paranoia turn you into a miser. Use this wealth boldly. Help people who need help. Fix systems that are broken. Give others the second chances I wish someone had given the families I watched suffer. There's a trust account waiting in Philadelphia, managed by the Morse firm. Catherine or her successor has instructions on how to structure everything legally. Keep enough for your family's security. That's not selfishness, it's wisdom. But the rest, please, make it matter. Make it change lives. Make it prove that sometimes, just sometimes, the world gives its treasures to those who will treasure others in return. Attached to this letter, you'll find legal documents that establish your rightful ownership of everything in this vault. These documents are dated and notarized from 1946, before the families who would later claim rights ever had standing. These documents supersede any challenge they might mount. Keep them safe. They're your shield against those who will try to take what you've found. The real fortune isn't in this vault. It's in what you'll do next. Prove me right. Be the person I hoped would find this place. Samuel Hartwell Sr., December 1946. The letter ended. Marcus sat in silence, reading it twice more, letting the weight of Samuel Sr.'s words settle into his bones. This wasn't just about money. It had never been about money. It was about trust, about faith in humanity, about believing that good people still existed and would do good things if given the chance. Attached to the letter were legal documents, deeds, trust papers, certificates of ownership, all dated and notarized from 1946. Everything properly filed and recorded, sitting in this vault for 40 years, waiting for the right person to find them. Marcus carefully folded the letter and documents, slid them back into the envelope, and sat in the vault's center, surrounded by more wealth than he'd ever imagined. And for the first time since buying this house, he didn't feel overwhelmed by the discovery. He felt clarity. He knew what he had to do, not because someone was forcing him, not because he thought he should, but because Samuel Sr. had been right. The real fortune wasn't the money. It was the opportunity to make the world a little less cruel for people like him, people who were drowning and desperate and convinced the universe had forgotten them. Marcus descended from the vault as the first light of dawn crept through the windows. He found Emma awake, sitting in the window seat of the bedroom, sketching in her notebook. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Were you in the vault again?" "Yeah." "Did you figure out what to do?" Marcus sat beside his daughter, pulling her close. "I think so. We're going to keep some of what's up there. Enough so you and Lily never have to worry about food or clothes or school. But the rest, we're going to use it to help other people. People like us. People who are trying so hard but can't quite make it work." Emma looked up at him with those two wise eyes. "Like the families at the soup kitchen?" "Yeah, like them. Mr. Samuel Sr. would be happy about that, wouldn't he?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, baby, I think he would." But even as he said it, even as he felt the rightness of the decision settling into place, Marcus knew the hard part was just beginning. The restoration committee Catherine had warned about, the families who believed they were owed this fortune, they wouldn't stop searching just because Marcus had found it first. If anything, they'd escalate. And somewhere out there they were watching, waiting, planning their next move. The battle for Samuel Hartwell's fortune was just beginning, and Marcus Blake, the desperate single father who'd bought a mansion for $800, was about to discover that finding the treasure was the easy part. Keeping it and staying alive long enough to do good with it would be something else entirely. The threat arrived 3 days after Marcus returned from Philadelphia. He found it slipped under the front door of the mansion, a cream-colored envelope with his name typed across the front. No return address, no postage. Someone had hand-delivered it. Inside was a single sheet of expensive letterhead. The Restoration Committee, preserving Hartwell legacy since 1947. The message was brief and chilling. "Mr. Blake, we are aware of your recent discovery. The assets you found belong rightfully to the surviving partners of Samuel Hartwell Sr.'s business ventures. We have documentation proving our claim. We strongly advise you to contact us immediately to discuss transfer of ownership. Failure to cooperate will result in legal action and other necessary measures. You have 1 week. A phone number was listed at the bottom. Nothing else. No names, no signatures. Just a threat wrapped in formal language." Marcus stood in the foyer, the letter trembling in his hands, and felt something shift inside him. For 3 years he'd been scared. Scared of eviction, scared of failing his daughters, scared of a world that seemed designed to crush people like him. Fear had been his constant companion, his baseline emotion. But standing in this mansion, holding this threat, knowing what was hidden in the vault above him, Marcus realized something. He was done being scared. These people, whoever they were, had been bullying their way through life for decades, using money and power to take what they wanted. They'd probably killed Samuel Sr. They'd definitely terrorized Samuel Jr. into hiding. But Marcus wasn't alone anymore. He had Catherine Morse. He had legal documents from 1946 establishing rightful ownership.
And he had something else, a bone-deep certainty that he'd earned this discovery through desperation and courage and the willingness to risk everything when he had nothing left to lose. He called Catherine immediately. "They found out," he said without preamble. "I got a letter from something called the Restoration Committee." Catherine's voice was calm but urgent. "Don't respond. Don't call that number. Bring me the letter. We need to move faster than I'd planned." By that afternoon, Marcus was back in Philadelphia, the letter sealed in a plastic bag like evidence. Catherine's office had transformed into a war room. 3 other attorneys had joined, along with a private investigator named Torres, who specialized in protecting high-net-worth individuals. "The Restoration Committee," Torres explained, pulling up files on his laptop, "consists of 3 families, the Bridgewaters, the Holcombs, and the DeMarcos. Old money from Samuel Sr.'s era. They were junior partners in some of his early railroad deals. When he started pulling out of joint ventures in the 1930s, they believed he was hiding profits that should have been shared. They've spent 80 years trying to find what they think he stole." "But he didn't steal anything," Marcus said. "No," Catherine agreed. "Our research shows Samuel Sr. bought out their partnerships legally, paying fair market value at the time. What happened after? His personal investments, his fortune building, had nothing to do with them. But they've convinced themselves otherwise, and they've used their wealth and influence to search." "So what do we do?" Catherine laid out a stack of documents. "We go on offense. We file a declaratory judgment action establishing your legal ownership of everything in that vault. We use Samuel Sr.'s documents from 1946 to prove chain of title. We expose the Restoration Committee's harassment. And we do it publicly, so they can't make you disappear like they did Samuel Jr." "You think they killed him?" "I think he disappeared very conveniently," Torres said. "Whether they killed him or scared him into running, we'll probably never know. But I guarantee they've been watching that house for decades, waiting for someone to find what they couldn't." The legal machinery moved faster than Marcus had imagined possible. Within a week, Catherine had filed a comprehensive lawsuit in federal court asking the judge to declare Marcus the rightful owner of the Hartwell fortune. The filing included every document from the vault, every piece of Samuel Sr.'s meticulous record-keeping, and a detailed history of the Restoration Committee's decades-long harassment. The story hit the media like a bomb. "Single father discovers $250 million fortune in abandoned mansion," ran on every major news outlet. Reporters descended on Millbrook. Camera crews lined Ashford Hill. Marcus's face was suddenly everywhere, this nobody carpenter who'd stumbled into the story of the century. The Restoration Committee filed their own lawsuit 3 days later, claiming that Samuel Sr.'s fortune had been built using profits that should have been distributed to partners. They demanded the entire vault be placed in escrow pending litigation. They hired 6 law firms and began a media campaign painting Marcus as a treasure hunter trying to steal their rightful inheritance. It would have been terrifying if Marcus hadn't been so angry. These people, these wealthy, entitled families who'd never struggled a day in their lives, were trying to take away his daughter's future because they believed the universe owed them more than they already had. The court hearing was set for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, Marcus had to live with the reality that his life had become a public spectacle. Reporters camped outside the mansion. His daughters couldn't go to school without being swarmed. Strangers showed up claiming to be long-lost relatives. The hardware store owner, Carl, was interviewed about Marcus's character. Even Mrs. Garcia found herself on television, describing what a good father Marcus was. Through it all, Catherine and her team worked. They interviewed historians who confirmed Samuel Sr.'s business dealings had been legitimate. They brought in forensic accountants who proved the fortune in the vault came from investments made after Samuel Sr. had severed ties with his old partners. They documented the Restoration Committee's history of intimidation and harassment, and Marcus, for his part, made a decision. Win or lose, he wasn't going to hide.
He agreed to an interview with a national news program, sitting in the mansion's study with Emma and Lily by his side. "Why do you think you deserve this fortune?" the interviewer asked. "I don't think I deserve it," Marcus said honestly. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. I bought this house legally. I solved the puzzles Samuel Hartwell left behind. I found what was hidden. But more importantly, I understand what Samuel Sr. wanted. He didn't hide this money so it could sit in a vault forever or go to people who already have everything they need. He hid it so that someday someone who actually needed it would find it and use it to help others." "What will you do with the money if you win?" Marcus looked at his daughters, then back at the camera. "I'll keep enough to make sure my girls never go hungry again. Never wonder if we'll have a home. Never feel invisible the way I've felt for 3 years. But the rest, the vast majority, I'm going to use it to help people like me. Single parents who are drowning, families facing eviction, kids who need medical care their parents can't afford. I'm going to build something that makes Samuel Hartwell's dream real. A world where desperate people get second chances." The interview aired on a Sunday night. By Monday morning, public opinion had shifted. Social media exploded with support. People who'd struggled shared their stories. Single parents wrote letters. The narrative changed from treasure hunter versus rightful heirs to desperate father versus entitled wealth. The Restoration Committee tried to fight back, but every move they made backfired. When they claimed Marcus was unqualified to manage such wealth, people pointed out that the 3 families had never worked a day in their lives. When they argued the fortune should go to them because of historical justice, people asked why billionaire families needed more money. When they tried to paint Marcus as greedy, people remembered he'd pledged to give away $250 million. The court hearing arrived in late November, 6 weeks after Marcus had found the vault. The federal courthouse in Philadelphia was packed. Reporters, supporters, curiosity seekers. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table with Catherine and her team wearing the only suit he owned, bought secondhand 3 years ago for Sarah's funeral. Across the aisle sat the Restoration Committee's lawyers, 6 of them in expensive suits, and behind them the families themselves. Marcus recognized them from photos Torres had shown him. Robert Bridgewater III, 72 years old, heir to a banking fortune. Patricia Holcomb, 68, whose family owned half of downtown Pittsburgh, and Vincent DeMarco, 59, whose grandfather had been Samuel Sr.'s most bitter rival. They looked at Marcus with open contempt. To them, he was nothing, a nobody who'd stumbled into something that should have been theirs. The hearing lasted 2 days. The Restoration Committee's lawyers presented their case. Samuel Sr. had been their partner. His fortune had been built on shared ventures. They deserved a portion of what he'd hidden. Catherine systematically destroyed every argument. She showed that Samuel Sr. had bought out all partnership agreements in the 1930s, paying fair market value. She demonstrated that every asset in the vault had been acquired after those partnerships ended. She presented Samuel Sr.'s own documents from 1946, establishing a trust specifically designed to prevent claims like this. But the moment that changed everything came on the second day. Catherine called Marcus to the stand. "Mr. Blake," she said, "tell the court how you came to purchase the Hartwell mansion." Marcus told the story. The eviction notice. The last $500, no, $800 in his checking account. The auction where no one else would bid. The desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he could give his daughters a home. "What did you think you were buying?" Catherine asked. "A broken-down house that needed more work than I could probably give it, but it was ours, and that mattered more than anything. Did you know about the hidden fortune?" "No, I thought I was buying shelter. I found something else entirely." "What do you plan to do with it?" Marcus looked directly at the judge. Samuel Hartwell Sr. left specific instructions. He wanted this fortune to help people who needed help, not in rich people who are already rich. I'm going to honor that. I'm going to establish a foundation that gives desperate families the kind of second chance I just got. Because 3 months ago, I was drowning. I was invisible. I was one crisis away from losing my daughters. Nobody helped me. Nobody even saw me. But Samuel Hartwell saw me across 80 years. He built a puzzle that would find someone like me, and now I have a responsibility to pass that kindness forward. The courtroom was silent. Even the Restoration Committee's lawyers had nothing to say. The judge took 2 weeks to issue her ruling. When it came, it was decisive and crushing to the committee's claims. The court finds that Marcus Blake is the legal and rightful owner of all assets discovered in the Hartwell Mansion vault. Samuel Hartwell Sr.'s documents establishing a trust for whoever proves worthy of finding what I have hidden are valid and binding. The Restoration Committee's claims are without merit and appear motivated by entitlement rather than legitimate legal standing. Mr. Blake's ownership is hereby confirmed. This case is closed. Marcus sat in Catherine's office when the ruling came through, and for the second time since finding the vault, he wept. Not from relief, though he felt that too, but from the overwhelming weight of responsibility lifting slightly. He'd won. The fortune was his. And now came the harder work, making it matter. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened. Catherine helped Marcus establish the Hartwell Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping struggling families in economically depressed communities. They set up a board of directors: Marcus, Catherine, a social worker, a financial advisor, and a single mother who'd once lived in her car with 3 kids. Marcus kept $5 million for his family. It felt both enormous and somehow exactly right. He paid off every debt. He established education trusts for Emma and Lily. He bought a reliable car to replace the dying truck. He set aside enough to maintain the mansion and live modestly without worrying about money ever again. The rest, $255 million, went into the foundation, and Marcus threw himself into making it work. He wasn't going to be some detached philanthropist signing checks from a distance. He would meet the people they helped, learn their stories, understand their struggles. The first family the foundation assisted was the Johnsons, who lived in Millbrook 3 streets down from the mansion. Marcus had seen them at the soup kitchen, a father working 3 jobs, a mother with cancer, 2 teenagers trying to stay in school while everything fell apart around them. The foundation paid their medical bills, covered 6 months of rent, and set up a small business loan so the father could start a carpentry business instead of working minimum wage. Mr. Johnson wept when Marcus handed him the check. "Why us?" he asked. "Because 2 months ago that was me," Marcus said. "And someone I never met decided I was worth saving. Now I'm passing it on." Word spread. Applications poured in. The foundation developed programs: emergency assistance for families facing eviction, medical bill coverage, small business grants, scholarships for kids whose parents couldn't afford college. They bought the abandoned textile mill on the hill and converted it into a community center with job training, daycare, and free meals. Millbrook began to change. Slowly, subtly, but undeniably. Storefronts that had been empty for years reopened. Young families who'd left started returning. The town that had been dying found reason to hope again. The Victorian mansion itself underwent a transformation. Marcus hired contractors to restore it properly, not as a private residence but as the foundation's headquarters and a community resource. The first floor became office space and a gathering hall. The second floor housed a library and tutoring center. The third floor remained Marcus and his daughter's private living space, though far more comfortable now with actual furniture, working heat, and bedrooms that didn't require sleeping bags. The vault remained sealed, no longer needed. Marcus kept the entrance as a reminder, a memorial to 2 Samuel Hartwells who'd spent their lives protecting a fortune that had finally found its purpose. But the threats didn't completely disappear. 6 months after the court ruling, Marcus was leaving a city council meeting where he'd proposed funding renovations for low-income housing when 3 men approached him in the parking lot. They were younger than he expected, maybe 30s or early 40s, wearing expensive casual clothes. "Marcus Blake?" the tallest one said. "That's me. We represent the families whose legacy you stole. We want you to know this isn't over." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He'd been expecting something like this. Torres had warned him that legal defeats didn't always stop entitled people. "I didn't steal anything," a judge agreed.
"Judges can be wrong," another man said. "That fortune was built on our grandparents' work."
"No," Marcus said, surprised by his own calm. "It was built by Samuel Hartwell investing his own money after he'd paid your families every penny he owed them. I've seen the receipts, I've read the contracts. Your grandparents were bought out fairly and they resented that Samuel got rich while they didn't. That's not theft, that's life." "You're nobody," the first man said, "some desperate handyman who got lucky. You don't deserve what you found." Marcus took a step closer. "You're right. I was nobody. I was a guy who couldn't pay rent, who fed his kids on charity, who felt invisible in a world that didn't care if I lived or died. But I took a risk nobody else would take. I solved a puzzle nobody else could solve. And I'm using what I found to help people like me, people your families would step over without a second glance." "We could make things very difficult for you," the third man said, his tone threatening. "You could try," Marcus said. "But here's what would happen. I'd call the police. I'd call the media. I'd tell them that billionaire families are threatening a single father because he won't give them money they were already told doesn't belong to them. How do you think that plays out for you?" The men stared at him, clearly not used to being challenged. Finally, the tallest one stepped back. "This isn't finished," he said. "Yeah, it is," Marcus replied. "You lost. Accept it and move on, or keep fighting and keep losing. Your choice." They left. Marcus stood alone in the parking lot, his hands shaking but his resolve solid. He'd been scared of these people, of their wealth and power and willingness to threaten, but he realized something. They were the ones who should be scared, because he'd done what they'd spent 80 years trying to do, and no amount of money or influence could change that. As the foundation grew, Marcus found something unexpected: healing. For 3 years, he'd carried Sarah's death like a weight around his neck. He'd been so consumed by survival, by keeping his daughters fed and sheltered, that he'd never properly grieved. He'd never processed the loss of his partner, his love, his co-parent. But now, helping families who were struggling the way he'd struggled, Marcus felt connected to something larger than his pain. Every single parent he helped, he saw Sarah. Every child he gave a chance to, he saw Emma and Lily. The work became a way of honoring his wife's memory, not by staying stuck in grief, but by making sure other families didn't have to suffer the way his had. One evening, he found himself in the mansion's tower room, Samuel Sr.'s stargazing spot, looking out over Millbrook. The town was lit up below him, and for the first time since Sarah's death, Marcus felt something like peace. Emma joined him, appearing silently the way she always did. "You okay, Dad?" "Yeah, baby. I think I actually am." "You think about Mom a lot still?" "Every day. But it's different now. It doesn't hurt as much as it used to." Emma leaned against him. "I think she'd be proud of what you're doing, helping people." Marcus's throat tightened. "Yeah, I think she would." By the foundation's first anniversary, they'd helped over 200 families. They'd prevented 63 evictions, paid medical bills for 47 people, funded 32 small business starts, provided scholarships for 89 students. The numbers were staggering, but what mattered more were the faces. The single mother who could keep her apartment, the father who could afford his daughter's asthma medication, the teenager who could go to college despite having no money. Marcus kept every thank you letter. They filled 3 filing cabinets in his office, and on hard days, he'd pull them out and read them. Reminders that this was real, that it mattered, that Samuel Hartwell Sr.'s dream had finally come true. The town of Millbrook transformed around them. 2 years after Marcus had bought the mansion for $800, Millbrook was no longer dying. New businesses opened downtown. The school district hired back teachers they'd laid off. Property values rose. Young families moved in. The soup kitchen saw fewer people needing free meals, not because people were hungrier, but because people could afford food again. And at the center of it all stood the Victorian mansion on Ashford Hill, restored to its former glory, its windows glowing warm in the evening light. The Hartwell Foundation headquarters, a beacon of hope in a town that had almost given up. Emma and Lily grew up in the spotlight in ways that could have damaged them, but somehow didn't. The foundation made sure they stayed grounded. Marcus insisted they volunteer in the programs they funded, serving meals in the cafeteria, tutoring younger kids, helping organize donation drives. They saw every day where their fortune had come from and where it was going. On the third anniversary of finding the vault, the town held a celebration. The mayor declared it Hartwell Foundation Day. Hundreds of people gathered in front of the mansion, people who'd been helped, people who'd volunteered, people who'd simply witnessed what was possible when someone chose generosity over greed. Marcus stood on the front porch looking out at all those faces and thought about the journey that had brought him here. 3 years ago, he'd been a broken man with $500, no, $800, to his name, buying a condemned house because he had no other options. He'd been scared, desperate, invisible. Now he stood before a community that had been rebuilt, holding his daughter's hands, knowing that his life had meaning beyond survival. He wasn't just a father anymore. He was a guardian of someone else's dream, a channel through which generosity could flow. A reminder that the world could be kind if someone was brave enough to make it so. He spoke without notes, from the heart. 3 years ago, I was exactly where some of you are now. I was drowning. I was terrified every single day that I wouldn't be enough for my daughters. I felt like the world had forgotten people like me existed. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was right about this. When you have nothing, you have to take risks nobody else would take. You have to believe in impossible things. You have to bet everything on hope. I bought this house with my last dollars, thinking I was buying shelter, but I bought something bigger. I bought a second chance. Not just for me, but for everyone in this town who needed to remember that giving up isn't the only option. Samuel Hartwell Sr. built this fortune 80 years ago because he believed desperate people deserved opportunities. He hid it in a puzzle that would eventually find someone who understood desperation. And somehow, impossibly, that someone was me. But this isn't about me. It never was. This is about what's possible when we stop turning away from each other's pain, when we build systems that help instead of hurt, when we remember that money's only value is in what it can do for others. Every family we've helped, every bill we've paid, every scholarship we've funded, that's Samuel Hartwell's legacy. That's what he wanted, and that's what we're going to keep doing as long as there are people who need help. The applause was thunderous. But what Marcus remembered most was looking down and seeing Emma and Lily, now 11 years old, tears streaming down their faces, pride shining in their eyes. In that moment, he knew. Whatever else happened in his life, whatever challenges still waited, he'd done the one thing that mattered most. He'd shown his daughters that the world could be kind, that people could be generous, that second chances were real, and that they, as young women growing up in this complicated world, had the power to change lives simply by choosing compassion over indifference. That night, after the celebration ended and the crowds dispersed, Marcus climbed to the vault one final time. He stood in the center of that steel-walled chamber, now mostly empty, the fortune flowing out into the world the way Samuel Sr. had always intended. He ran his fingers along the cold metal walls, remembering that first night when he'd opened this door and found something impossible. He thought about Samuel Sr. and Samuel Jr., about the puzzles they'd created and the trust they'd placed in whoever would eventually find them. "I hope I made you proud," Marcus whispered to the shadows. "I hope this is what you wanted." The vault didn't answer. But somehow, Marcus felt they heard him. Two ghosts finally at peace, knowing their legacy was exactly what they'd hoped it would be. He descended the hidden staircase, locked the doors behind him, and returned to the life he'd built. The girls were already asleep in their rooms, real rooms now, with real beds and real furniture and the kind of security Marcus had once thought was reserved for other people's children. But they weren't other people anymore. They were the Blake family, and their story, Marcus's story, had become part of Millbrook's identity. The desperate handyman who'd taken a risk nobody else would take. The single father who'd solved a decades-old mystery. The man who'd found a fortune and given it away because he understood that the real wealth was never in the money itself. As Marcus lay in his own bed that night, for the first time in years, sleeping soundly, he realized something profound. He'd spent 3 years after Sarah's death feeling like he'd lost everything that mattered. But the universe hadn't taken everything away. It had just been preparing him for this. For the moment when he'd have nothing left to lose and everything to gain. When desperation would make him brave enough to bet on hope. When poverty would teach him the value of every dollar he'd eventually give away. Samuel Hartwell Sr. had been right. The fortune wasn't the money. The fortune was the journey that led to it. The struggles that made you worthy. The desperation that made you fearless. The suffering that taught you empathy. The darkness that helped you appreciate light. Marcus Blake had bought an abandoned Victorian mansion for $800 thinking he was purchasing shelter. Instead, he'd purchased purpose. He'd purchased meaning. He'd purchased the chance to prove that sometimes, just sometimes, broken things could be made beautiful again. And in doing so, he hadn't just rebuilt a house or discovered a fortune. He'd rebuilt himself. And in rebuilding himself, he'd helped rebuild an entire community. Because that was the real secret Samuel Hartwell Sr. had hidden in his mansion. Not gold or bonds or artwork, but a truth that transcended wealth. The most valuable thing any person can do is use whatever resources they have, money, time, skills, compassion, to help someone else climb out of the darkness they themselves once knew. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories that will move your heart. Click to keep discovering what's possible when courage meets opportunity. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes broken down houses hold miracles and desperate people working 3 jobs can change the world.